Okay, I had a most wonderful childhood. I grew up on a farm in south central Minnesota, and I grew up in a Lutheran church, in fact. It was a wonderful extended family experience. But then I went away to college at the University of Minnesota, going into a brand new environment, and in a way I wasn't quite prepared for it. And I was looking for meaning and position for myself in a big city. And I was part of a sorority, which then became involved with meetings held at the fraternity across the street. And that was my first exposure to Christian Zionist theology. I didn't really understand it all at the time. But if you remember, this was sort of at the end of the hippie era, Vietnam. On the main campus of the university, there was a lot of peace activism there. But having grown up in a very conservative family, having grown up with parents who were staunchly Republican, and also there was this whole element of respect of elders, not questioning things, not growing up with a critical mind. When I was at the university, I was afraid really to go on to the main campus because that's where all the liberal ideas were. So I thought, well, how about getting more involved in something to do with Christianity, Christian outreach, campus outreach. So I started going to Bible studies. And for me, it was quite a revolution because I'll never forget the very first Bible study I went to. We spent one entire hour on one verse. And it was going into a depth I'd never experienced. Well, over time, staying involved with these people led me into adopting the Christian Zionist interpretation of Scripture. It led me to living in the state of Ohio at a Bible study center. And it was a center where, in fact, Hal Lindsey came to speak, and I literally sat at the feet of Hal Lindsey, who's one of the modern day prophets. He actually went on to become involved with Ronald Reagan, and he even had meetings advising at the Pentagon as well. And that was an emphasis on Armageddon. So for us, there was a real focus on the end times. I really believed we were in the end times according to Scripture. And thinking back on this, people wonder, well, why did I do this? Yes, it was partly out of fear, not having this critical background to look at things, wanting to live a fervent, meaningful life. It gave me purpose. In America, there was a lot of materialism as well growing at the time, and I knew I didn't want to go down that road either. I didn't want to go down the peace movement, the liberal aspect and view of life, and so that seemed to suit me. And going to Ohio and finding many other young people following this theology seemed a wonderful thing to do. And but while I was there, I met an Englishman, and I was fascinated to meet somebody from another country, and I ended up moving to England. We got married. There wasn't the same Christian Zionist community here, but it was very evangelical, charismatic grouping of people. And it was exciting to be amongst them and all of their music. So I got involved in that church life, started having children, which I loved, being a mother and a wife and having a home of my own. Well, I would think back to the whole Christian Zionist teaching, and we knew that we were in the last days, and we certainly talked about it a lot in the church. However, when we'd studied under Hal Lindsey, there was the idea that the rapture would be taking place in the 80s. Well, that time came and went. It didn't bother me. I thought, oh yes, sometimes interpretation isn't quite right, but we're still definitely in the end times. In the meantime, I will enjoy having my family and friends. And I went along like this and was still very supportive of the state of Israel, certainly treated Jewish people as still the chosen people, adopting all the tenets, really, of Christian Zionism. But then, in 1988, and through another church event that I attended, I met a Palestinian for the first time. And it was shocking, really, because this Palestinian happened to be a Christian, and he was a vicar from Nablus. At that time, we thought all Palestinians were terrorists, so it was very unsettling to meet this person who seemed such a good person. And over a period of 4 days, we ended up spending a lot of time with him, and he told us the story of his family and the Nakba. I knew nothing of this. So it got me thinking a lot more. A few years after that, we went to the Holy Land for the first time on a pilgrimage. This group of people stayed in Bethlehem. It was the first time this particular tour agency, had sent anybody to Bethlehem. But because the group was made up of a lot of young people, it was cheaper to stay in Bethlehem than Jerusalem. So as far as the agent went, it was an experiment. But it meant we stayed in this little town full of Arab people. Our guidebooks had said to avoid Bethlehem, Nazareth, Hebron, places like that it would be unsafe for us, and it would be dirty and just not a pleasant experience. So just go out, see the highlights in places like that. But here we were, based in Bethlehem. We'd go for our outings during the day, and in the evening return to the hotel. My husband and I walked up and down the streets, meeting the people. We loved it. We felt safe. I mean, there was dark at night. We felt as if we were amongst friends. The shopkeepers, everybody was so kind and helpful, and really a joy to be with. Then on the penultimate day, we discovered that our guide actually wasn't a Christian. He was a Muslim. This really shook us to the core, because the church we were in demonized Islam. And here we were with somebody that I thought was more spiritual than some of our church leaders. I returned home after that and just wanted to get a hold of every book I could lay my hands on to do with the history of that part of the world. And I realized I didn't know the history at all. That for years and years and years, I had been fed a way to interpret the Bible, a system of beliefs, which in fact wasn't true. And the more I investigated it, the more I realized it didn't line up what I felt was the heart of God. And so this journey went on, not only reading books, but meeting people, attending conferences. Thankfully, by then, our children were old enough and independent, so I had this time to learn, to meet, to study. It's been quite a transformative experience. It certainly hasn't been easy. Coming from a faith that was full of judgment, which was very black and white, has been scary. And, you know, at times the whole judgment thing and that I shall be going to hell has plagued me and troubled me. However, I found that on this journey, I've come to meet such amazing people from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, and I've moved on to looking at people as individuals, to looking at the dignity of every human being, the way that every human being should be treated, the rights every human being should have in life, to live in homes safely with their families, the right to education, the right to work, the right to pursue their path in life.